Psalms 69, 1 through 75. Devotional focus verse. Make haste, O God, to deliver me. Make haste to help me, O Lord. Psalm 71. In the United States, 911 is the number to call in case of emergency. Doing so connects the caller to an emergency response system designed to quickly dispatch police, fire, or medical assistance to the scene. The system of providing an easy-to-remember national number for emergencies was implemented in 1967 when Congress legislated 911 as the national emergency number. The first ever 911 call was placed at 2 p.m. on Friday, February 16, 1968 by Alabama Speaker of the House Rankin Fite from the Haleyville City Hall to U.S. Representative Tom Bevill at the city's police station. Since that day, much publicity and training has been invested in an effort to ensure that people nationwide know how to summon help when emergencies occur. Even very young children are taught this easy 3-digit number. Adults are reminded in management seminars, emergency training sessions, and various other venues that calling 911 should be an immediate step in any crisis situation. In fact, the system has been so effective that a call to any other number in search of emergency assistance is likely to be fruitless or frustrating at best, and at worst, could result in loss of life. As effective as the 911 system has been, our focus verse describes a far more immediate and effective way to summon help from a capable source when an emergency arises. God is not only instantly available when we cry out to Him, but He is infinitely powerful, more than able to offer help and deliverance, no matter what we are facing. David, the author of this psalm, was a man who had experienced many crises in his lifetime. He knew what it was to face desperate circumstances, to live in mortal danger, and to feel overwhelmed by fear. Many times he cried out to his divine emergency response provider, and never once did God fail to answer him. When he wrote this psalm, he was oppressed by enemies who apparently were assailing him with cruel persecution and mockery. Fearing that he might be overwhelmed by their attacks, he cried out once again for God to deliver him. It is notable that he never questioned God's ability to intervene. His primary plea was that God would make haste. Whether the challenges we face are physical, emotional, or spiritual, we need never hesitate to call out to God. He stands ready to come to our assistance, just as He did for David. Background information. Psalms 69 and 70 were compiled for tabernacle worship and were part of Book 2, the subdivided portion of the Book of Psalms often referred to as the Exodus book. Psalm 69. Traditionally ascribed to David, the authorship of Psalm 69 is verified in Romans 11, 9, and 10, where the Apostle Paul quoted verses 22 and 23 and indicated that they were spoken by David. Psalm 69 is a cry of distress which describes the psalmist's unmerited suffering at the hand of his enemies. While David's agony of spirit was personal, his words also had messianic implications. There are several New Testament allusions to the psalm. Compare verse 4 with John 15:25 and verse 25 with Matthew 23:38. With the exception of Psalm 22, Psalm 69 is the psalm most often quoted in the New Testament. Like Psalm 45, this psalm is dedicated to the chief musician. The phrase, upon Shoshinnim, either indicates that the song was to be sung to the tune of a song titled Lilies or played on a lily-shaped instrument. There is no clear internal indicator of the precise time frame in which the psalm was written. Several periods in David's life could correspond with the sentiments expressed. In this plaintive song, David pleaded for divine deliverance from the hands of his enemies, using the metaphor of rising waters in the first two verses to portray his desperate sense of peril. In verses 5 and 6, David made it clear that his concern was not only personal, but also for those who might have been impacted by his foolishness or lack of wisdom. His statement in verse 10 that when he wept and chastened his soul with fasting, that was to my reproach, indicates his adversaries had jeered at him for his sorrow and for donning sackcloth, the traditional symbol of deep mourning. David again employed the metaphor of water in verses 14 and 15 to describe his sense of being overcome by those who hated him. In verses 21 through 28, one of the strongest imprecatory passages in the Word of God, David pleaded for the justice of divine punishment upon his adversaries. While verse 21 may have inferred that oppression had rendered David's food and drink unpalatable, it was also a messianic reference to Jesus, alluding to the vinegar mixed with gall that was offered to Christ as he hung on the cross. See Matthew 27:34. Starting with verse 29, the psalmist's tone moderated, and he began to incorporate thankfulness and praise into his song. The final three verses are a doxology of praise and confidence in God. Most scholars deem verses 35 and 36 as a reference to the expansion of Jerusalem and Israel during the future millennial kingdom, culminating in the finality of God's blessings and prosperity on His chosen people, the Jews. Psalm 70. Psalm 70 was also ascribed to David and was a replication of the last 5 verses of Psalm 40, with slight variations. The superscription, "to bring to remembrance," may have alluded to a memorial of some specific event. Commentators agree that Psalm 40 was likely the original work, and that the verses in this psalm were separated out for liturgical usage in the temple worship. The tone of this psalm conveys desperate urgency, as David pleaded for speedy deliverance and retribution against his enemies. Conclusion. A child of God can rest in the knowledge that the personal and sovereign God is near and will unfailingly respond to his prayer.
Psalm 69. Save me, O God, for the waters are comen unto my soul. I sink in deep mire, where there is no standing. I am come into deep waters, where the floods overflow me. I am weary of my crying, my throat is dried, mine eyes fail while I wait for my God. They that hate me without a cause are more than the hairs of mine head, they that would destroy me, being mine enemies wrongfully, are mighty, then I restored that which I took not away. O God, Thou knowest my foolishness, and my sins are not hid from Thee. Let not them that wait on Thee, O Lord God of hosts, be ashamed for my sake, let not those that seek Thee be confounded for my sake, O God of Israel. Because for Thy sake I have borne reproach, shame hath covered my face. I am become a stranger unto my brethren, and an alien unto my mother's children. For the zeal of Thine house hath eaten me up, and the reproaches of them that reproach Thee are fallen upon me. When I wept, and chastened my soul with fasting, that was to my reproach. I made sackcloth also my garment, and I became a proverb to them. They that sit in the gate speak against me, and I was the song of the drunkards. But as for me, my prayer is unto Thee, O Lord, in an acceptable time, O God, in the multitude of Thy mercy hear me, in the truth of Thy salvation. Deliver me out of the mire, and let me not sink, let me be delivered from them that hate me, and out of the deep waters. Let not the water flood overflow me, neither let the deep swallow me up, and let not the pit shut her mouth upon me. Hear me, O Lord, for Thy loving kindness is good, turn unto me according to the multitude of Thy tender mercies. and hide not thy face from thy servant, for I am in trouble, hear me speedily. Draw nigh unto my soul, and redeem it, deliver me because of mine enemies. Thou hast known my reproach, and my shame, and my dishonor, mine adversaries are all before thee. Reproach hath broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness, and I looked for some to take pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. They gave me also gall for my meat, and in my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. Let their table become a snare before them, and that which should have been for their welfare, let it become a trap. Let their eyes be darkened, that they see not, and make their loins continually to shake. Pour out thine indignation upon them, and let thy wrathful anger take hold of them. Let their habitation be desolate, and let none dwell in their tents. For they persecute him whom thou hast smitten, and they talk to the grief of those whom thou hast wounded. Add iniquity unto their iniquity, and let them not come into thy righteousness. Let them be blotted out of the book of the living, and not be written with the righteous. But I am poor and sorrowful, let thy salvation, O God, set me up on high. I will praise the name of God with a song, and will magnify him with thanksgiving. This also shall please the Lord better than an ox or bullock that hath horns and hoofs. The humble shall see this, and be glad, and your heart shall live that seek God. For the Lord heareth the poor, and despiseth not his prisoners. Let the heaven and earth praise him, the seas, and everything that moveth therein. For God will save Zion, and will build the cities of Judah, that they may dwell there, and have it in possession. The seed also of his servants shall inherit it, and they that love his name shall dwell therein. Psalm 70. Make haste, O God, to deliver me, make haste to help me, O Lord. Let them be ashamed and confounded that seek after my soul, let them be turned backward, and put to confusion, that desire my hurt. Let them be turned back for a reward of their shame that say, Aha, aha. Let all those that seek thee rejoice and be glad in thee, and let such as love thy salvation say continually, Let God be magnified. But I am poor and needy, make haste unto me, O God, thou art my help and my deliverer, O Lord, make no tarrying.